The willful destruction of our agricultural bounty during a time of need is absolutely scandalous.
The willful destruction of crops is sometimes necessary.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Welcome to the American Religious Town Hall meeting. I'm James Weingartner, filling in for Pastor Lutz, and we're here this morning to have a really good discussion about the subject of waste not, want not. Now, our usual panel consists of 6 panelists, but because of the quarantine issues, we've moved to 4 and we've spread out some. And so we want to introduce to you our panelists here today. And we're going to begin on my right with Canon John Peterson.
My name is John Peterson, and I am an Episcopal priest, canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington.
I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I'm the senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I serve as senior minister, First Christian Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas.
Hello, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
During the recent pandemic, we heard stories of sadness, discovery, and occasionally about joy. Many people died, many worked at home, and others lost their jobs. Yet one story was especially troubling. It was a story on the plight of farmers. Because they lacked workers and because they lost markets, they purposely destroyed what they produced. They dumped millions of gallons of milk down drains, shattered millions of eggs, and plowed their fields ripe with produce simply because they could not sell them. This is not a new remedy. It took place during the Great Depression as well. Yet it raises huge moral questions for all of us. Millions of people around the world are dying due to the lack of food. Poverty in the United States is equally problematic. Americans are among the wealthiest people on earth, but we have yet to share with those in greatest need the bounty that we've received. Farmers and their workers need to be paid. Starving people need to be fed. We have the means to make a difference, but we seem to lack the will to share with those. As that backdrop, we would like to ask our panelists, 1, is the action of our farmers only about money? 2, how do we make decisions on what to share, when to share, and how best to share our resources? And 3, how can the American people and its leaders better prepare for future times of plenty during future times of despair? And now we go to our panelists, and we return to Canon John Peterson.
Thank you so very much. A few days into the pandemic in mid-April, we saw on our televisions for several weeks exactly what the moderator has described this morning in his statement. Millions of gallons of milk being dumped into drains in Idaho. Huge warehouses full of potatoes being destroyed. In Florida, we saw farmers on their plows plowing up crops that should have been picked but not able to be processed. What we saw was a scandal, as food pantries around the nation were being overrun every single day by thousands of people who had no food. I remember seeing days on end when cars were in line in San Diego, 2 and 3 miles long, trying to get into a food pantry to be able to receive some food. One of the things that I did not know, however, about the distribution of food is the fact that there are basically 2 forms of distribution. One form is for the farmer who grows crops only for commercial purposes, i.e. for large businesses, for airlines, for caterers, et cetera, et cetera. And those packages are packed, like if you have broccoli, you pack those packages in 25 pounds of broccoli. Well, for commercial use, for families, et cetera, you get your broccoli packed in 8-ounce containers. And the problem became simply being able to change over from being a commercial for large businesses to simply dealing with domesticated use of the food. And that change simply could not take place instantaneously, and consequently, the farmers who were producing for the large gatherings and the huge commercial uses had to ultimately plow their vegetables underground. And so here we have that type of a situation in which the food indeed is plentiful, but could not be packaged, could not be sent off to the proper places for use.
Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. Yeah, Canon Peterson, I don't disagree with any of that, and I would imagine that the vast majority of the farmers that you're talking about would agree with you as well, that this is a very regrettable circumstance. The realities, I guess I have to put myself in the position of some of my former parishioners, not so much, I've served churches in big cities for the past 25, 30 years now. But back when I served churches in Missouri, where there were a lot of farmers in the churches, I learned a lot about the realities of the agricultural industry and what they are faced with. Crops are planted with specific sale on the other end in mind, and once the crops are in the ground, and if the buyer goes away, then you got to find another buyer real quick, because the crops are going to come out at the time that they're going to be ready, and they have to be harvested at that time. And if there's nobody to buy it, then there is no reason to. It costs money to get it harvested in the dairy industry. Those cows are going to keep giving milk every day, and you got to milk them, and you've got to do something with the milk. The milk's either going to be sold or it's going to go bad. So the problem is, you and I could buy it as the good old USA. The government could come in and buy it and then distribute it to, the government could provide the link between Farmer Fred and Hungry Joe if it wanted to. If there was the political will to spend the money to pay Farmer Fred to harvest his crop, to get his milk ready for sale, for distribution, then to do the transporting to Hungry Joe over here. But without that link, unless Farmer Fred actually knows Hungry Joe, and they'll give their milk or whatever they can to a few people that are around, but the large amounts of product that are coming out of their fields that have to be, as I say, harvested or dealt with at the time that they're ready to be dealt with. That's what causes, and this happened during the Depression, as you said in your moderator's statement, but it happens every time we have an economic downturn. It's not just the Great Depression and now. There have been other times in our history that farmers have had to do this, and I don't know of one of them that does not regard it as an immoral act. They would say, yeah, immoral, and I'm losing my shirt, and I can't send my kids to college, and I can't put food on my table. It's just a regrettable situation all the way around when we lack the political will to make the connection to solve the problem. That's a big political hurdle to get over because it costs money.
Dr. Matthews.
Yes, I appreciate the comments of our Canon Peterson and Reverend Plumley. This is it's a sad topic, and I remember seeing the images of the milk just as they said, millions of gallons of milk just being wasted. Then when I looked at it a little closer, studied it, why not give this away? And I'm focusing on the milk. Of course, the pandemic shut everything down. The National School Lunch Program is the largest buyer of milk products, and of course, the demand just wasn't there. And as Reverend Plumley mentioned, cows have to be milked. You have to milk them. And I read an article from Van Groningen, who basically says that the distribution of it is a logistical nightmare. It's just a nightmare. He said that basically they considered giving these over to pantries and people who are in need, but the refrigerated trucks are not ample. You don't have a whole lot of refrigerated trucks, and food pantries do not have a lot of refrigeration to store with the milk in particular. Then also, they said on top of that, farms would need to hire additional labor because to make the dairy products, and then also the farmers would be liable. I thought that was very interesting for products that they sell or donate. So it's a nightmare, and it's a challenge, and it's just one of those things that we just can't avoid. Cows have to be milked, and regulations also, the dairy is not like produce, which allows farmers to just give it away. There are regulations out there as well, and some pretty strict ones as well.
Rabbi Levin.
So I can't speak to the agricultural challenges and how farming methods, and I think we've heard really important elucidations about the logistical challenges that farmers face. But to me, the issue goes to really two things. One is, are we going to take seriously the moral conviction that we will feed the hungry? So in Leviticus chapter 19, it teaches us that when you harvest your field, you leave the edges and the gleanings there for the poor and for the stranger to be able to not just be able to have food, but to have it with dignity. In the book of Isaiah, in chapter 58, we're taught that the reason why we fast and to try to atone for our sins is to inspire us to share our bread with the hungry. And so I learned long ago that the problem of world hunger is not one of supply. The problem of world hunger is a political problem and a logistical issue of how do you distribute food from places of plenty, like the breadbasket of America, to places that are suffering from want, from famine, not just in America or in the Americas, but around the world. And it would seem to me that you need to start figuring out how to answer the question of these problems, not when the problem exists, but long before the problem exists, so that when the problem appears, you know what you're doing. I think about in California when they suffered from the drought and the farmers were not able to find enough water to irrigate their crops, especially the almond crop, which is very thirsty for water. And then I discovered that in California, they don't reclaim even 1% of the wastewater. Whereas in Israel, which is an arid country, which has figured out how to literally make the desert bloom, they reclaim somewhere in the neighborhood of 70% of their wastewater. So if California had a program to reclaim their wastewater, they would never have to worry about drought. There would always be storehouses of water that they would be able to use. And so I think that if you apply will and technology, the logistical know-how of human beings around the world, there could be systems that would replace buyers in times of need so that farmers wouldn't lose their productivity, would be able, as you say, to send their kids to college and to put food on their own tables, but at the same time feed the hungry around the world.
Very good. Reverend Plumley?
Yeah, that reminds me, I'm talking about Farmer Fred and Hungry Joe. That might be Hungry Jose, or even more telling, Hungry Cho in North Korea, who we're not going to, we have this political issue with helping them out. And that goes not just for North Korea, but that's just the first one that came to my mind. There are all sorts of places that we fear that anything that we give there will be will not go to the places that we want it to go, or that will be propping up a government that needs to fall, needs to be weakened, and so hungry people all over the world are not fed when we've got all this production capacity. It's distribution issues, transport issues, but it's the vast majority of the problem is political will.
Canon Peterson.
Yes. We've heard lots of doom and gloom as a result of the food shortages today. I want to tell a good story. A person, his name was John Bolte, from Westchester, New York, saw this crisis in the Bronx. They simply did not have food in the food lines, etc. And so what he did is that he went and made a contract or an agreement with Idaho, and he rented a truck and put 43,000 pounds of potatoes on this truck and drove it to the Bronx. And it was so successful what he did that he received so much money from people who just wanted to help support this type of an initiative that this started up as a process then, and more trucks were being taken out into the grain belt areas as well as to Idaho to the potatoes, and bringing food into New York for the food banks. And so, it isn't simply a government situation, but it's when people actually get involved to be able to help solve this type of problem that actually food banks in the Bronx were able to benefit from this, as well as then the farmer, because they paid the farmer the going rate for the food. So it was a win-win in both situations.
Reverend Plumley?
Yeah, political will has to do with more than just government action. It has to do with the actions of all of us about whether we want to help certain people.
Yes?
And I think that can also happen on the micro level. So in the pandemic downturn, a lot of the local food purveyors suddenly didn't have restaurants or other buyers in the industrial food industry to sell their produce. But what we found in our congregation was when we sent out the word, hey, do you want to help feed needy people in the congregation? A lot of people said, where do I send the check? And what we've done is we've sort of partnered with the purveyors who don't have a market to say, hey, we'll take your produce, and then we box it up and we send it to members of our community who are in need, and to give it also to local food pantries and to local food banks. So I think that, as you identified, Canon, that there are lots of, I think, possibilities when people of goodwill are willing to get together and do the work.
Dr. Matthews?
Yes, in the same vein, I think private foundations, I was reading about a Lucky Duck Foundation, I think it's in San Diego, and they've, with other philanthropists, they have a nationwide drive to feed the homeless, those who are in shelter, and people around the country who are homeless. And, we all just get together. I don't know if there's actually a food shortage. I think the distribution is the key.
Yeah.
We have challenges, and it's beautiful to hear the good stories of what can happen, and it's tragic to hear the ones that they don't. Let's go now to a word from our sponsor.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching.
Welcome back, and thank you, Town Hall Estates. Let's now hear our summaries from our panelists about food waste. Kenneth Peterson?
Thank you. I'm going to pick up on what Dan was speaking about just in the closing session, closing minutes, because how we partner with our relations with different parishes or different churches or different social groups makes a huge difference. And the National Cathedral has done this quite uniquely, is that they have partnered with the Baptist UCC Church in the 8th Ward in Washington, the poorest ward, obviously, in Washington, D.C. And they've collected huge amounts of food, like 3.5 tons every month of food to provide to that Baptist partner church with the National Cathedral. And so I think that the creativity that we can have in relationship to partners that we develop and that we have certainly helps. And those do not have to necessarily even be in our own cities, but in our country or internationally. Because the distribution is certainly the major problem. And how one distributes when in a pandemic has become an issue that we've all had to deal with in this time of COVID-19.
Reverend Plumley.
Thank you. Another good story. One of the places that has consistently fed the hungry in our communities, whether large or small, is our public schools. Kids get fed 2 meals a day. It used to just be lunch. Now, in lots of schools, I know the school that our church has a one-on-one relationship with. It's 95% of the kids get 2 meals a day there. Well, that's gone away with no school, and so the school district has organized churches. Our church is one of them. Religious institutions, period, to partner with designated families to replace those meals that the kids in the families would ordinarily get with groceries each week, and it's working out very well.
Dr. Matthews.
Yes, I remember being in a country on a mission trip, and there were kids walking miles to just get a scoop of rice. And many of us who've been out of the country on mission trips in remote places, some of these places are just stricken with extreme poverty. And whenever I come back, I always try to tell myself not to be wasteful. So I think this topic is another reminder that when things are well and we live in a land of plenty, that we really shouldn't be wasteful, with our food products or anything. And second, what are we going to do when things get back to normal? We're in COVID-19 right now. I think we need to, our churches, the ones that are ministering to people from a spiritual perspective and helping them with food, food pantries, we need to just partner with parachurch ministries and really not let up on helping people who are poor. Lastly, Proverbs 19 says, whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deed. And I think that we need to be concerned about making sure that people are fed.
Rabbi Levin.
I think one of the things that has always struck me about issues of poverty or about issues of hunger is that they tend to be addressed in a micro fashion, but the issues need to be addressed really in a macro fashion. They're systems issues.
Yep.
And as we identified, I think, in this conversation, there are a whole lot of variables at play when it comes to the provision and the distribution of agriculture. And so if we really want to make a dent in hunger in America or hunger in our world, we're going to have to take a systems approach to that. And I think that too often what happens is that there are organizations that form and they do their thing. And they do their thing well, but they don't do their thing in consultation or in concert necessarily with other organizations that are also doing their thing. And I think that if there can be the coordination of different folks doing their thing in a systems planning effort, we can really make a big difference in the lives of people who are desperately poor. For example, you could take the subsidies that pay farmers in difficult times, and you could use that to pay buyers who will buy the produce from the farmers who then can deliver it to needy people so that the market system still works the way it's supposed to.
Thank you, Rabbi Levin. These questions are important ones, and it's an interesting political question, Reverend Plumley, because we have a system that has politically determined how to manage crops, milk, and other subjects. And all of those have come together to work in normal times. And then it all comes apart at the seams in the other times. And so it's an important topic, and we ought to maybe involve ourselves politically to work toward better ends for those subjects. The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy, and the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week, at the same time, over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.